I'd like to begin our first workshop on power abuse in academia. Welcome to our workshop facilitator, Dr. Oля Videnska. Oля studied medicine, specializing in medical biophysics in Moscow, and worked on her MD thesis devoted to traumatic brain injury at the University of Pittsburgh, USA. She further did her PhD in Berlin, Germany, working on multi-omics approach to research of liver cancer and precancerous conditions. She continued her work in translational medicine and mass spectrometry in Dresden, Germany. Currently, she works as scientific communication officer in the biotech industry. Additionally to her main job, Oля devotes her spare time to academic mental health advocacy. She's a co-founder of Dragonfly Mental Health, the Max Planck Mental Health Initiative, and the Sidesteps Mentoring Program, and many other initiatives. Thank you, Oля. The virtual stage is yours.
Thank you so much. I hope you hear me well. And as it's written here already, and as Sasha already mentioned, please feel free to ask moderators questions if you want to ask them anonymously, or send it to me. Send them to me in my personal message here, and then I also, if you want, be able to read it out loud after the end of the conversation of my talk today. Let me share my screen first. Yes, and I hope you all can see it. Thank you, Sasha, for nodding. That is important. Yes, so today we're going to talk about power abuse in academia, and not only what it is, we'll go through the definitions and legislations partially, but also what we can do and what can be done from both approaches, from bottom up and from top to bottom. So, but before we start, I also would like to give a disclaimer that Dragonfly Mental Health is not a healthcare provided organization, and this information today is provided not as a medical advice, but rather as an educational concept. So, of course, today's talk doesn't substitute for speaking to medical professional. Additionally, today's presentation is not about the legal aspects of power abuse, and we all know that we're all coming from different places in different countries, and many things and details depend on the local legislation. So today's presentation is also only educational, and of course doesn't substitute for speaking to a legal professional as well. So before we go into details, I'd like to say that if you are need some support in terms of, and you are in crisis, you can go to already mentioned resources on the webpage of Minds. Also, you can always go to nearest emergency room in case of mental health emergency. Even if you don't speak local language, they should be able to help you. And always, please, when you need to, check for the local support resources. Now, what we'll do today, basically, we'll go through the personal introduction here. Then we'll go through an example of a fictional character who went through power abuse. We'll go through definitions, and we'll discuss why reporting is good and what we can do, and will be followed up by a discussion. Originally, this talk was developed by Dr. Marta Oliveira during her work time as a PhD student, and further then she reached out to us and allowed Dragonfly to adapt this talk so it would be more widely applicable. Let's put it this way. Now, Sasha already mentioned my full story, basically. Things which I think are relevant for me presenting this talk today is that I also myself went through several cases of power abuse. And the most recent one was when I was already finished my postdoc and started to work in a company. And so, unfortunately, once in a while, we all may be subjected to power abuse and harassment and other things. So it's important that we all know what to do and how we can help others, even though we currently might as well not be ourselves in this situation. Now, we came up with the Katie story. Katie is a fictional character. So we thought that And of course, this story is based on several stories of people who Dragonfly talked to and mentor and members of Dragonfly, volunteers of Dragonfly, and so on. So Katie went through some power abuse cases. In her case, she was made to work on Saturdays and Sundays under visa pressure because she was an immigrant, and she came from the developing countries to a developed country, and so she was told by her supervisor that if she doesn't work on Saturdays and Sundays, then not only he will not prolong her visa, but also her university graduation is at stake. At the university or in the institute, there was no leadership training, no proper position on what to do, and definitions of power abuse, no awareness about what it is. And so Katie gained anxiety, and of course her mental health deteriorated, obviously, under such a pressure. She was for a very long time scared to ask for help. And it was not clear to her, it was not right next to her reach if there were structures or processes at the place in the university. So turned out there were no mandatory things, no protocols. So Katie finished her project, barely defended, and she was eventually protected by the members of her committee who were not her supervisors, based on personal agreements and not based on some structural protocols. Eventually, she left academia. So yeah, a very similar story happened to me. I, however, didn't ask for help because I thought that it was normal, that everyone lives this way. And so when we started to work on this power abuse story, I thought that it's a great opportunity to share with people and to start a discussion what's normal and what's not. Sorry, this is a typo here. So some institutes, however, based on similar stories, actually managed to develop student initiatives, and the students got support by sometimes directors and board of directors, and sometimes they were even invited to join the task force, and sometimes experts from the outside were invited to moderate and consult. Essentially, that's of course great when the university or institute or any entity has a code of conduct procedure in case of misbehavior and interventions to improve culture. Now, let's talk about definitions, because as scientists, we are all about definitions, and most of the arguments are happening because people use different definitions. So let's make sure that we're all on the same page in terms of what is power abuse, what is harassment, and what is discrimination. Power abuse is a misuse of a position of power to take an advantage of a person in an inferior position to either gain some personal gain, for either personal gain or to harm the said person, according to UNESCO's definition from 2020. So, of course, power abuse affects the victim's self-confidence and self-esteem. It violates the dignity and impacts their work motivation and mental health and of the victim or the ones in the team. So, for example, making your PhD students, when you're a supervisor and making your PhD students to work on Saturdays or Saturdays and Sundays, even though their contract clearly states working hour from Monday to Friday, 9 to 5. So making them to come outside of working hours to the lab is a power abuse. So this is probably one of the most classical examples. Now, harassment, however, is something different. Harassment is an unwelcome conduct that is based on race, color, religion, sex, national origin, age, disability, or genetic information, including family medical history, according to the US Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. Most of us probably know and heard of a specific case of harassment that is a sexual harassment. Sexual harassment is any unwelcome sexual advance, request for sexual favor, a verbal or physical conduct or gesture of a sexual nature, or any other behavior or of a sexual nature that might reasonably be expected or be perceived to cause offense or humiliation to another person, according to the UN definition. So basically, when somebody is approaching Another person with a sexual advances, this is unwelcome sexual advance, this is a sexual harassment, and this of course has to be taken care of very carefully and not dismissed. Another thing is discrimination, and discrimination is any distinction, exclusion, or preference made on the basis of race, color, sex, religion, political opinion, national extraction, or social origin, which has the effect of nullifying or impairing equality of opportunity or treatment in employment or occupation. This is very old terms by United Nations in 1958. It's important to remind that discrimination at work is often illegal, however, not in all the cases. And organizations and states must perform, and sometimes do perform, measures to prevent and fight discrimination. For example, making women to do the laboratory dishes because they're women, or put together the table for Christmas party because they're women, is discrimination. It's, of course, some sort of power abuse as well, but in this particular case, it's discrimination because women are discriminated and men are not. So men are not putting on the table or doing the lab dishes or sending out the invitations for the meeting or taking minutes, for example. So this is discrimination. Or making the most junior colleague always to take minutes of meetings is also a discrimination, because people are based on their basically based on their position. So however, again, I would like to underline that these are sort of general, very general definitions, and exact definitions may depend, and most likely will depend, on the local legislation. So if you want to know exactly what's going on according to the law, it's better that you check with the legal authority, with the lawyer that is based and is aware of the exact details of the law based on which country you're based at, because it may be different from one country to another. So please be aware of it. So examples, homophobic jokes, women in the kitchen commentaries, again, meeting outside of working hours, sexual harassment, and another one which I think is not that well known is team meetings including sports, or team meetings that includes members of the team pay money, and sometimes people may not have money. So all those things have to be taken care of in consideration and addressed properly. And again, cases may qualify differently. So, and they might violate the local law depending on domestic legislation. So it depends on the law at the country you reside or work at. Please be mindful about it. Further, harassment in academia, unfortunately, is taking a huge part of our lives as academics, and overall academia is rather prone to have harassment and power abuse, generally speaking, because academia has strong hierarchies and dependencies. The power in academia is very individual based, and academia is very much competitive and performance driven. So all these things play a huge role in academia being very susceptible to harassment, power abuse, and discrimination. How common is harassment? Pretty common, unfortunately. So according to like 5 years old questionnaires, incidents for PhD students, up to 35% of PhD students experienced harassment, and up to 52% witnessed it. Of course, that depends whether on whether the person belongs to a marginalized group or not. So, for example, 60% of mixed race researchers experience discrimination or harassment during their PhD program. 45% of researchers identifying as homosexuals and 42% of female researchers had experienced discrimination, harassment, or bullying at work. So the numbers are pretty drastic, and we decided that we should do something about it. So that's how this talk was adapted, thankfully, by Marta's from Marta's talk. Impact, of course, and this is I think Helmholtz. I think this is N Square report and maybe global PhD survey from Germany. So these are the Helmholtz numbers. And if people who have experienced or been subjected to bullying have their anxiety score higher or lower. So we see that the more often person experiences bullying, the more their anxiety score is. And it's not only in Helmholtz association, we know that the numbers are similar for Leibniz and for Max Planck. Now, I think we have seen that situation is pretty drastic and it needs to be addressed. But first of all, of course, we'd like this talk to be heard by people who are currently experiencing harassment and or dealing with that. So it's important that you internalize that it's not your fault, that you're not alone, and that this should not be happening. These three sentences, I think they're very important, probably the most important, because as long as we are able to internalize that it's not our fault and that it shouldn't be happening and that we're not alone, one way or another, maybe not right away, but we'll deal with it. But it's most importantly to understand that it shouldn't be happening and that it's not our fault and that we're not alone. First of all, trust your instincts. If it feels bad, it needs to be addressed as soon as possible. Please be aware that sometimes it gets worse, and if it's not addressed on a timely manner, then it may be getting worse day by day. Take care of yourself. As soon as possible, remove yourself from danger. So ask for help, and you don't have to ask for help within the institutional setting. You can ask for sick leave, for therapy, for burnout leave, for anything, and deal with it. Take a sick leave, take a break, and try to deal with it and give yourself a mental ease. We recommend that you document everything. What happened, where and when? Were there any witnesses? If there were, who are they? Do you have any emails? Forward them to yourself, take print screens, and necessarily write down how it made you feel. We tend to forget things, we tend to eliminate things from our brain, and of course sometimes things just disappear from our minds. And also if there's so many, it's not easy to memorize all of them. So please, as much as possible, document. Doesn't necessarily mean that you're planning or going on with the reporting, but it's better if you have everything documented. Finally, if you want to report, and we'll discuss this a bit later, first of all, figure out whom you should be reporting to. So it could be ombudsperson or PhD office or postdoc office or your supervisor if you're experiencing harassment or power abuse or discrimination not from your supervisor, or an HR. But of course, always keep in mind that depending on superiority of your PI, there always may be some conflict of interest involved. So please be careful and mindful about it. Now, reporting is something that I encourage you to take with consideration. First of all, we all need to understand and remind that reporting takes time. It is disturbing, and being reminded or re-experiencing experiencing again or touching upon this experiences when you have to report can be disturbing, can be triggering, and please be careful to yourself and gentle to yourself, and be mindful that it can be taxing on your mental state. Of course, it requires confidentiality, empathy, and action. So please make sure that the person to whom you're reporting has these qualities and you feel comfortable within settings they provide. we strongly encourage you to get the support, whether it's friends and family or therapy or anything else you can imagine. You don't have to go through this alone. Finally, it's important to heal first. So do report when you feel like you're ready. And for sometimes it takes some time, sometimes it's a long time, but first make sure that you're at a good place. And always keep in mind that that reporting, it actually helps preventing the harasser from getting promoted, from getting more students, and essentially from making more of such actions. But you should keep in mind that you are the priority to take care of yourself first. Now, we understand that power abuse in academia, especially because academia is so prone to have power abuse, is a systemic issue. So dealing with power abuse is never a one person, not a process that can be done by one person. So we can act from the top down approach or bottom to top approach, bottom up approach. And this now we would like to discuss what can be done if you are an early career researcher. We recommend to organize yourself in groups, preferentially networks, preferentially recognized by the directors of the institute. Best if you have some elected representatives. It's not always possible. Sometimes it's too few people. Sometimes the organizations just getting together first. Yeah, and then try to find allies to lobby together. So graduate school officers or staff council, anyone whom you can imagine could be supportive of your initiatives. Make sure that directors and other stakeholders know your interests. Some of them will be happy to support you, some not. Don't let that discourage you. If someone is not supportive, it's their choice, but it shouldn't be preventing you from following up on your initiatives. Break the taboo and talk about mental health, power abuse, discrimination, and many of these topics, and you'll find allies, maybe not right away, and maybe you'll have some weird conversations with people, but I'm sure there will be some people who support you. We recommend that you host meetings and discussions, that you invite speakers about mental health, power abuse, write in blogs, write to your local newspapers or newsletters, everywhere we can make a noise, make a noise. Then please make sure that you have some internal documentation on how to get help in case you need it. Figure out which structures are there. And it's better if you, as soon as you organize in some reasonable group, try to push your organization to have a code of conduct or code of behavior. If there's not one yet, or if it doesn't have anything about the power abuse or harassment or discrimination, please make sure that you at least once in a while bring it up on the faculty meetings that it needs to be taken care of. Other things that early career researchers can do is to manage upward. We even have a workshop in Dragonfly, and it's on our YouTube channel as well. That's called Manage Upward. So teach yourself and others and learn how to set expectations and boundaries with your supervisors. Of course, it's not easy. Of course, it takes time. Of course, it takes courage. And we're not saying that, after this talk today, you'll get out of your room and go to your supervisor and immediately set expectations and boundaries. Do it step by step, one small achievement after another, and slowly, step by step, try to get there. Educate yourself, check yourself and your biases, make sure that you're aware of your own experiences and your biases and your judgments. Be kind and respectful, of course. Take care of yourself and on your colleagues, and when possible, be an active bystander. So there's sometimes training available on YouTube, sometimes training available on other resources. They teach basically how to distract a person who is violent, and how to delegate the support, and how to check in with victim. Now, these are the things that can be taken care of by early career researchers, but also, of course, we don't want to say that dealing with power abuse is something what only early career researchers should do. It's up to everyone. It takes a village. It's not too easy. It's not easy. It's a horribly long and difficult process, but it has to be done. So group leaders can also do something. First of all, accept that conflicts and different boundaries will exist in a team. Be prepared for hard conversations. Learn active listening. Be a part of culture where those topics are openly discussed. If you see that your students or your supervisees or mentees discuss it, don't block them. Promote this discussion and make sure that you're supporting them. Make sure that team members know what to do if they feel mistreated. Make sure that you support them. Make sure that they know where to go to, and it's safe to go to you, but they also should be free to choose another person to go to. Finally, respect team members' boundaries and make it easy for them to tell you this was not okay. Make sure that it's safe to tell them to you that some things were not okay. Make sure that you accept such conversations and such messages with dignity. Be thankful for feedback and try to again work on your own judgments. How can group leaders be allies? This is also very important. So we encourage group leaders to be active in progressive leadership culture. So we should reach a critical mass at a certain point. And we do see many group leaders and more group leaders are being supportive of such initiatives. So we're grateful to each and every one of them. And this number is growing. So we're very happy. It's important to be getting aware about the responsibilities of being a leader, train leadership skills actively, get a coach for difficult situations, and talk about these topics to your colleagues. Also be a model to your students. Take care of yourself, express boundaries in a non-violent way. Again, non-violent communication is something we can all learn. Respect and appreciate when receiving a boundary. That's what we already discussed. Again, support students, organizations, PhD offices. And that's what I always tell group leaders. And, PhD students are struggling enough without cases of power abuse against them. Getting a PhD degree in research is a extremely difficult time. So we should always be supportive of whatever organizations they're creating. Try to be a part in the career training committee, scientific strategy meetings, influence directors if you can. So tell directors that we need this, we need that, we need more support of this, we need to provide more support of that. Also make sure that your institute has a code of conduct, psychological counseling, and trained points of contact. It's not an easy, and we understand that in institutes where there is no such thing as mental health initiative or such counseling or points of contact, it may take a couple of years to establish all these programs, but it still needs to be done, and you need to advocate for it especially when you're joining as a new, for example, group leader. If you change the position, make sure that you check all these things before you accept the offer. Raise awareness to diversity officers, influence directors. Always say that excellent institutes have it. Now, that would be my last slide, basically, and then I'll be very happy to have a discussion. We'll have plenty of time. Conclusions. Harassment is widespread in academia and can look very different. Harassment leads to serious mental health problems, and it affects productivity and science quality. And there are ways to prevent and fight discrimination, harassment, and power abuse, and employers may be liable to react. So if you're a victim, you're not alone. Take care of yourself and make sure that you're in a safe place. Document even if you don't want to report it, because you may change your mind, and it's better that you have all the documentation ready. Report only when you feel ready, and get involved in your institute. Make sure that there is code of conduct and good reporting system. Also manage your supervisor's expectations and set boundaries. Be an active bystander when you see something. Check in with the victim after you witness. And be an ally by supporting student organizations. Get informed, check yourself, and inform others. There are some resources. Max Delbruck Centrum in Berlin webpage has a conflict and code of conduct. Check it out. Friends of Sarah is a support program for women that are PhD candidates or postdocs experiencing difficult times at work. And European Commission has the whole anti-harassment procedures. And Elephant in the Lab also has the whole set of settings and materials about power abuse. With this, I'd like to thank you for your time. I'll be extremely happy if you provide us with some feedback. Just to let me know, if you think that something has to be adapted or changed. And if you don't feel comfortable asking questions right now, and this I can totally understand, then please feel free to drop me an email or find us in Twitter or in LinkedIn, anywhere we're there. Not necessarily now, not necessarily after, right after the talk. Reach out to me when you feel ready if you'd like to share something, and let's see how Dragonfly can be helpful.